design is a blueprint or a plan for the collection, measurement, and analysis of data created to answer your research questions. What are the issues involved in research design? The issues may be relating to decisions regarding research strategies, the extent to which the study is manipulated or controlled by the researcher, location and the study setting, the level at which the data will be analyzed or its unit of analysis, and temporal aspects or time horizon integral to research design. These issues are often referred to as the elements of research design. A strategy is a plan to achieve a certain goal. A research strategy will enable you to answer your research questions and achieve your research objectives. As such, your choice of a particular research strategy is guided by the type of your research questions and research objectives, your viewpoints on what makes a good research, and on practical aspects such as data sources and time constraints. Typically, there are 8 types of research strategies to choose from. Explanations about each type of research strategy come next. Experiments are usually associated with causal research and/or a hypothetical deductive approach to research. The purpose of an experiment is to study causal relationships between variables. However, experimental designs are less useful or appropriate for answering exploratory and descriptive research questions. Experiments may be experimental or non-experimental. In an experimental study, the researcher manipulates the independent variable to study the effect of this manipulation on the dependent variable. It is a very strong design to use as the results may be conclusive and powerful. It enables the testing of hypotheses and answers the research questions, thereby establishing the cause-effect relationships. A non-experimental research, on the other hand, answers research questions about the current state of affairs. It identifies factors and relationships among them. It is also used in a correlational study. A survey is a system for collecting information from or about people to describe, compare, or explain their knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. The survey strategy is very popular in applied research contexts because it allows the researcher to collect quantitative and qualitative data on many types of research questions. Surveys are commonly used in exploratory and descriptive research to collect data about people, events, or situations. Popular survey instruments are self-administered interviews and structured observation. A survey is a strategy used in a causal study, a correlational study, and studies involving hypothesis testing. A causal study establishes cause-effect relationships among variables. It tests whether or not one variable causes another variable to change by delineating one or more factors. A correlational study is used to determine the degree of the association between two or more variables for the possibility to make predictions based on these relationships. In a hypothesis testing type of survey, A researcher observes the reality of a phenomenon and then identifies a theory about the phenomenon. From the theory, a testable hypothesis is then developed. A case study is a research strategy that involves an empirical investigation of a particular contemporary phenomenon within its real-life context using multiple methods of data collection. Case studies focus on collecting information about a specific object, event, or activity such as a particular person, department, business unit, or organization. In case studies, the case is the individual, the group, the organization, the event, or the situation the researcher is interested in. The idea behind a case study is that in order to obtain a clear picture of a problem, we must examine the real-life situation from various angles and perspectives using multiple methods of data collection. It should be noted that case studies may provide both qualitative and quantitative data for analysis and interpretation. As in experimental research, hypotheses can be developed in case studies as well. Action research is a formative evaluation often used by researchers and practitioners interested in improving programs and practices. It is practical and problem-solving in nature based on a cyclic process of action, reflection on the results of action, and further action based on this reflection. Action researchers are very often professional practitioners who use this strategy as a means of researching into and changing their own professional behavior. Thus, it is often highly participative in nature, and it usually involves an examination of the beliefs, values, and assumptions that have contributed to the situation being investigated. Once an idea, problem, or opportunity is identified, we go through the following 4-step spiral. Diagnose or investigate, plan, act, and reflect or evaluate. Each loop can be regarded as a small experiment or research project, but the process usually continues until the problem is solved. Grounded theory research is an inductive qualitative research design. It is used for generating and developing theories and explanations based on systematically collected qualitative data. The data collection process is usually an ongoing iterative process that starts with collecting and analyzing qualitative data and leads to a tentative theory development. Then, more qualitative data are collected and analyzed that lead to further clarification and development of the theory. The qualitative data collection and further theory development process continues until the particular theory is developed that is grounded in the data. Ethnographic research is a qualitative research design that is used for studying social groups, cultures, and human interactions in natural, cultural, and social settings. The goal of the ethnographic study is to provide a detailed, in-depth, and holistic narrative description of the group and the cultural setting being studied. Primary ethnographic data collection methods to comprehensively describe a cultural and social setting are in-depth interviews and participant observation. An archival research strategy is basically a historical research. It is a systematic process for searching, exploring, summarizing, and reporting past information and events using primary and secondary sources of historical data to gain understanding of historical events, issues, and policies. Primary sources of historical data are the original first-hand artifact, documents, observations, oral presentations, diaries, photographs, and audio-visual recordings of past events. Secondary sources are second-hand, non-direct, oral and written documentation of past events that are summarized and documented by others and not the original primary sources. Qualitative studies are often carried out to better understand the nature of a problem. Extensive interviews with many people might have to be undertaken to get a handle of the situation and understand the phenomenon. When the data reveals some pattern regarding the phenomenon of interest, theories are developed and hypotheses formulated. Other methods, such as experimental method for instance, are subsequently used to test these hypotheses. Along these lines, combinations of qualitative and quantitative methods are used in many studies. That is, mixed methods research aims to answer research questions that cannot be answered by qualitative or quantitative approach alone. Mixed method research focuses on collecting, analyzing, and mixing both quantitative and qualitative data in a single study or series of studies. This approach is encouraged as it allows researchers to combine inductive and deductive thinking to use more than one research method to address the research problem and to solve this problem using different types of data. However, a mixed method approach complicates the research design and therefore requires clear presentation to allow the reader to sort out its different components. A technique that is also often associated with using mixed methods is triangulation. The idea behind triangulation is that we can be more confident in a result if the use of different methods or sources leads to the same results. From the research strategies, let's now proceed to the other four elements of research design: the extent of researcher interference, study setting, unit of analysis, and the time horizon. The extent of interference by the researcher has a direct bearing on whether the study undertaken is correlational or causal. The extent of the interference may be minimal, moderate, or excessive. A correlational study is conducted in a natural environment with minimal interference by the researcher with the normal flow of events. For example, if a researcher wants to study factors influencing training effectiveness, all that this researcher has to do is delineate the relevant variables, collect the relevant data, and analyze them to come up with the findings. In studies conducted to establish cause and effect relationships, the researcher tries to manipulate certain variables so as to study the effects of such manipulation on the dependent variable of interest. In other words, the researcher deliberately changes certain variables in the setting and interferes with the events as they normally occur. In other cases, the researcher might even want to create an altogether new artificial setting where the cause and effect relationships can be studied by manipulating certain variables and tightly controlling certain others, as in a laboratory. Business and management research can be done in the natural environment where events proceed normally, that is, in non-contrived settings, or in artificial or contrived settings. Exploratory and descriptive or correlational studies are invariably conducted in non-contrived settings, whereas most causal studies are done in contrived lab settings. Studies done in non-contrived settings are called field studies. Various factors are examined in the natural setting in which daily activities go on as normal with minimal researcher interference. In a field experiment, cause and effect relationships are studied, with some amount of researcher interference, but still in the natural setting where events continue in the normal way. In lab experiments, the researcher explores cause and effect relationships, not only exercising a high degree of control, but also in an artificial and deliberately created setting. The unit of analysis refers to the level of aggregation at which information is analyzed and conclusions are drawn. Our problem statement and research questions determine the appropriate unit of analysis to be selected for our study. For example, if our problem statement focuses on how to raise the motivational level of employees in general, then we are interested in individual employees in the organization and have to find out what we can do to raise their motivation. In this case, the unit of analysis is the individual. If we are interested in studying two-person interactions, then several two-person groups, also known as dyads, will become the unit of analysis. However, if the problem statement is related to group effectiveness, or if we want to compare two groups, for example, group decision-making patterns, then the unit of analysis will be at the group level. But if we are comparing different departments in the organization, then the data analysis will be done at the departmental level, and we treat department as the unit of analysis. As our research question addresses issues that move away from the individuals to dyads, to groups, or to organizations and even nations, our unit of analysis will shift from individuals to dyads, groups, organizations, and nations. Likewise, if we want to study cultural differences among nations, we will have to collect data from different countries and study the underlying patterns of culture in each country. To answer the research questions, data for a study may be gathered in one shot or are gathered at two or more points in time. In a cross-sectional study, data are gathered just once, perhaps over a period of days or weeks or months. This type of data collection tends to be efficient in terms of time and cost, and it is not necessary to track any changes over any given time period. But in a longitudinal study, the researcher might want to study people or phenomena at more than one point in time in order to answer the research question. This method of data collection would take more time and effort and cost more. It is also used when research question requires tracking of certain factors or detecting possible causal connections.